Hi everyone, I'm Leggy Ballesteros. I am president of PAs in Obesity Medicine, and PAOM, along in partnership with APAC and AHPAC, are wanting to present Laura Ross, presenting today for us. Laura is actually a physician associate certified in lifestyle medicine and as clinical lipid specialist. She's the director of the Heart Disease Prevention Clinic at the Park Nicollet Heart and Vascular Center in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. She's the immediate past president of the Academy of PAs in Cardiology and is the current chair of the Education Committee. Career highlights include leadership roles at the American College of Cardiology, as well as clinical research and starting the HeartBeet Lifestyle Medicine Clinic. Today, she'll be presenting Let Us Turn Up the Beat, the HeartBeet Clinic. And again, guys, if you didn't come in earlier, if you do want to request CME for attending, please email pasinobesitymedicine@gmail to get your post-session eval and also your CME certificate. And so with that, we have Laura. So go ahead.
So much for that nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm sure I will be preaching to the choir a little bit, talking about using food as medicine, but I hope I can give you some new facts about why that's so important, how easy it can be to incorporate into your daily practice, and some of the things we're able to do at our clinic to really help patients be successful. So yes, let us turn up the beat. There's all sorts of things we can do to treat cardiovascular disease, and some seem fairly extreme, like open heart surgery, right? It costs over $110,000, 3 months of, recuperation and rehab. And yet, when we tell patients to maybe think about incorporating more of a whole food plant-based diet, they feel that that's very extreme. But the great thing is, there really aren't any side effects from this. So when I start to build a relationship with patients, I'll slowly plant some seeds each visit about how to use food as medicine and what I've learned through personal experience with my husband and my twin brother who had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, even though they were big marathon runners, both of them. We found that an all or nothing approach isn't possible for everyone or even necessary because both of those men got their cholesterol and blood pressure to go with just eating more plants and a little less Mountain Dew. So it helped me think of how can I incorporate some of these lessons into caring for some of my patients. And when you think about eating more plant-based, it's really important to focus on this is a lifestyle change. It's not a diet. And I love Dr. Michael Greger. If any of you have read his book, How Not to Die, or his sequel, How Not to Diet, that we should all be eating fruits and vegetables as if our life depends on it. Because they do. And so we know chronic disease is a big problem in this country. But 80% of chronic disease is related to lifestyle factors. So this includes substance misuse, diet, activity, or inactivity, and 133 million Americans have at least one chronic disease. Many more have more than one, and that's 3 in 5 adults. $3.5 trillion of spending is related to chronic disease, and it's 90% of healthcare spending. So we are at a pivotal spot as PAs to be able to really help turn the course, change the trajectory. And when they did a large meta-analysis over 20 countries, they found the 4 leading dietary risks of chronic disease wasn't McDonald's, Burger King, and Arby's. It was really not enough whole grains, not enough nuts and seeds, not enough fruits and vegetables, and too much. The only thing that it's had too much of was sodium. So I have had a lot of success talking to patients about what they should eat more of than all of the favorite things they have to cut out. And so when I approach this with patients, I really like to reference the healthy eating plate or the Harvard plate versus that kind of odd upside down pyramid that might have been published somewhere out there recently. Really say, if you have cardiovascular disease, we should have half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter of the plate should be whole grains, and a quarter of the plate should be a healthy protein, a lean protein. Think about using healthy oils. We know that, the poly and monounsaturated fats actually kind of trick the receptors in our liver that are busy with those healthy fats that it pumps out more receptors to suck out the bad fat and cholesterol. So those oils can help improve cholesterol. And whole grains, this could be a whole nother talk just about the gut microbiome. We know fiber is Mother Nature's sponge that just soaks up cholesterol and doesn't let your body reabsorb it. So having that quarter plate of whole grains like oatmeal, brown rice, wild rice, quinoa, barley, you're not only doing your arteries a favor by soaking up the cholesterol and scrubbing them out on the way out, you're also helping your colon by soaking up those toxins. And we think that's a big reason why colon cancer is on the rise, is that we're just not getting enough fiber. It's interesting that the bacteria that breaks down fiber in our gut produces a short chain fatty acid that blocks GLP-1 receptors. And so we know that people who eat more fiber feel more full. So there are some ways to help, work through that pathway, with food as medicine as well. And we know that fiber is important in fermentation in the gut, which helps. I think the last I read is 3 trillion bacteria are in our gut. And so this is why we think people process medications differently, have different reactions to food, as all of these bacteria in our gut. And so this is one of my favorite books, Fiber Fueled, which comes in a chapter book, but also he came out with a cookbook. And so I have a very weird family. So I'm a lifelong vegetarian, married to a hunter. I know, fate is funny. And then we have 3 kids who eat all different dietary patterns. And yet, that cookbook, we all really enjoy the foods from there. So if you're looking for one, that's one of my favorites. He talks about healing the gut, IBS, as well as cardiovascular disease. So when we start to think about talking to patients about why should you change what you're doing, is really trying to help them find their way, doing those SMART goals you may have heard of before. Make it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to their goal, and time bound. So I use these kind of like a prescription. I say, but I just gave you a lot of information. What sounds sustainable between now and our next visit, or now and our next set of labs? And write that down. And they're like, I'm going to eat more vegetables. I'm like, okay, which vegetables are you going to try? Make it more specific. How many times a day or a week? If they went from 0 vegetables, like maybe just on the weekends, try that. Make it measurable. Is it going to be 1? Or is it going to be 2? Or cups or whole vegetables? Make it achievable. I love when patients come in, so motivated. I'm sure I'm just that good. Just kidding. They're like, I want to be vegan. I'm like, awesome, but you're a carnivore. Let's start like with one thing at a time, just to make sure it's sustainable. So picking just 1 or 2 food goals, and then time bound. I think we're in just this perfect spot where we can say, we're going to check all of these markers. We're going to check labs, glucose, HSCRP that looks for inflammation in your heart arteries, which we know eating, like food as medicine can help. Weight loss can help lowering blood pressure and sugar. All these things lower that biomarker, which patients and I love to see. And then also we're going to be touching base about what their weight is, what their blood pressure is. So I think that time bound has been kind of my secret sauce. Instead of saying, I'll see you next year. Yeah, eat more vegetables, see you next year. Didn't have a lot of success with that. Okay, let me see here. There it goes. So here's another example. So what else could we do? Replace 1 animal protein at a meal with a plant-based protein, or, meatless Mondays, add an additional serving of vegetables, or even try some of the smartphone apps that are free, like the basic levels of Chronometer are free, where they can, just kind of keep track. I say, don't worry about calories or fat or even cholesterol. It's really try to aim to get toward 40 grams of fiber to really help lower that cholesterol. And I'm always surprised. I do it a couple times a year just to make sure everyone in my family is kind of getting what we need to get, since we're mostly plant-based. Like avocados are the powerhouse. They have so much fiber, so much potassium. They're great sources of all the things we're looking for. And so this all sounds great, right? But what about the research? So Dr. Dean Ornish is a Harvard-trained cardiologist who really walked the walk. He enrolled patients in this pivotal trial, in the 80s. Look how long ago that was. And he put half the group in intensive lifestyle changes. So they had a health coach to help them stop smoking. They had a chef, they had a physical trainer, versus a control group, which was kind of standard of care. And he did angiograms, so where they go into your heart artery, squirt dye down there, and try to see, what are the blockages like. Now, as many of you know, thank goodness all our arteries are made bigger than we need them, but if it's blocked more than 70%, that's when someone might need a stent or open heart surgery. So as we look at this diameter of stenosis or narrowing, kind of, they started around 40% for the control group versus the intensive lifestyle changes. But in just 1 year, we could start to see the diameter of the stenosis dropped in the treatment group. And at 5 years, it dropped even more compared to the control group. That diameter of stenosis really increased. More importantly, there was a 91% reduction in the frequency of anginal episodes. So these are debilitating for patients. They stop walking, they stop exercising because they have chest pain, but all of a sudden 91% reduction in how often they were having those debilitating symptoms. And there was a 37% reduction in LDL. Now, most of us can't get our patients to kind of live in a hotel and have all those resources for a whole year, but we can work toward that, in small steps as well. And you can see too that the control group had twice as many cardiovascular events. So, 1992, this came out. We're like, we're going to be out of jobs. Look how great everybody's doing with lifestyle medicine. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We still have more to do, and PAs play a pivotal role in that. So then another great organization is the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So they are very pro low-fat vegan diet, and they really pitted that against the Mediterranean diet in an interesting study where they did the same group was their own control group. So for 4 months, you were either in the Mediterranean diet or the low-fat vegan group. Then there was a 4-week washout, and then those groups did the opposite diet, and they kind of followed what happened. Everybody met with a dietitian, and there was no restriction in what food the participants could eat, but they found that people who are low-fat vegan actually ate 500 calories less than the Mediterranean diet. And we think it really goes back to how that fiber makes you feel full, and you're just not grabbing for as much food. It's very low in cholesterol. It's only animal products. Other than coconut oil and palm oil that are full of saturated fat that really bump up the LDL, and it makes you feel fuller. We also think that when you digest plant-based food, there's an increase in thermic effect. You're burning more calories faster with plants versus animal products. So here's kind of a graph of where they started, and then they had that washout period in the middle, and then you saw that their body weight came down again in 4 months when they followed the low-fat vegan diet versus the Mediterranean diet. So where we really saw the low-fat vegan was that they had greater reduction in body weight by about 6 kilograms, and their fat mass and visceral mass decreased. Their cholesterol dropped about 15 points. And then interestingly, it was the Mediterranean diet that helped lower the blood pressure more, and with systolic and diastolic compared to the low-fat vegan diet. So I think it really does go back, to the why. What are you looking to control? Is it blood pressure? Is it weight loss? And then working with the patient to see what changes are sustainable to you. We also had a lot of meta-analysis that kind of confirms plant-forward diets, which would be the DASH, the Mediterranean, vegan, vegetarian, really help us see less cardiovascular disease. But the quality of the plant-based foods matters. So for instance, Oreos and cheese balls are vegan, but they're really good for you. So when they did a meta-analysis of over 200,000 participants, we found that patients who had higher adherence to healthful plant-based diets had a 25% reduction in cardiovascular disease compared to plant-based diets that were more of the unhealthy foods, the cheese balls. They had a 32% increase cardiovascular heart disease risk. So the quality of the food matters. And then as we looked at over 8 studies, including over 130,000 adults, vegetarian diet was associated with a 30% reduction in ischemic heart disease mortality, which is actually what most of us care a lot about. Is it going to kill us? Compared to non-vegetarian diet. So we have enough data to say we should all be eating more plants, right? And then we have the PREDIMED study that was planned for 6 years, but was terminated early after just 4.8 years because it was so clear that the groups that followed a Mediterranean diet, and they had a group that had 4 ounces of nuts a day, or a liter of olive oil a week. That's a lot of oil, but those Italians, they're like pouring it all over their pizza, they're taking shots, and that's where it was done. It reached a statistically significant reduction in the composite endpoint of MIs, strokes, or cardiovascular death. And this was compared to a low-fat kind of more American diet. So we have a lot of information that eating more plants is better. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine took a look at this and said, wow, who did the best in that group? And maybe was there something else that helped the study close early? And really, when they looked at patients who followed more of a vegan diet, they had the best outcome. And those were often the ones who, when they were randomized into the olive oil and the nut group, even in the control group, those patients seemed to do better. But there was no weight loss in the PreDiMed trial. You can imagine a liter of olive oil might have some calories there too. But again, it gets back to the why. Are we, how do we balance all of those things? A desire for weight loss, but also a desire to prevent cardiovascular disease. I think too, when I have in the Midwest, in Minnesota, we have a lot of bachelor farmers. And so trying to talk to them about lowering your LDL, they don't know what that is. But what about, helping the environment? How about, not being able to work on your farm if you were to have a stroke? For some people too, just talking about the benefits of weight loss too, that we saw in some of the studies that I reviewed. So, we can talk a lot about how great weight loss is. I'm preaching to the choir here again, but weight loss itself doesn't do, for most people, as good of a job in lowering cholesterol. So generally, about 80% of our cholesterol is genetically determined. We can make it increase about 20% or get 20% worse by following, carnivore diet versus vegan diet. However, I have two examples, real life examples of people that were high absorbers. So if we think of how you absorb, saturated fat from your diet that might affect your cholesterol, it's kind of a bell-shaped curve. So most people it's about 20%, but there's people on the edges who they can eat everything, that should increase their cholesterol and it doesn't change at all. And others who, do everything they can and nothing happens or huge changes happen. So this is, identifiers removed, but in our lab, it's the far right of my screen shows the labs coming into the HeartBeet Clinic, which we're going to talk more about. So someone's total cholesterol is 293, triglycerides were 266, HDL was low, LDL was 201, which is kind of a flag. Well, this person might be at risk for familial hypercholesterolemia, that genetic mutation that gives men a 50% risk of having a heart attack by the time they're in their 50s and women a 30% risk by the time they're in their 60s if they don't treat cholesterol. So I saw this number and I was like, we're going to be seeing each other after the HeartBeet Clinic so I can start you on some medication. It was just so high. Her A1C, you can see, was 11.5, weight was 200 pounds. We went through a 2-month HeartBeet Clinic program, which was really based on the pillars of lifestyle medicine, and we'll dive deep into the details here shortly. But after just 2 months, her LDL dropped from 201 to 142, way more than the 20% that we anticipated, and her A1C dropped to 9.4. Just talking about eating more plants, and her weight dropped 20 pounds. 3 months later, we kept going. The HeartBeet Clinic was done, but I was like, I'm still concerned about your cholesterol and your A1C. Let's keep plugging along and see where we're at. And by that time, she had seen her primary care doctor who did start metformin, and her A1C had dropped to 6.5, but her LDL dropped another 20 points down to 121. And her triglycerides were 163, and then her weight dropped another 10 pounds. So then 3 months after that, you see these great results that her LDL dropped almost 50%, down to 106, almost to goal for someone living with diabetes. Her goal is to get off metformin, and she's trending that way with an A1C of 6.3, and her weight's down to 165. So just kind of the power of food as medicine. This is one extreme of how some people can be super responders, aka super absorbers of kind of responding to the food in their diet, versus this is a patient who came in really concerned about developing diabetes because it ran in her family, but she herself had never had an elevated glucose. Her primary care doctor saw this LDL of 546, which was a big change from 2022 when it was 126, and the doctor's like, what's going on? And I found out she was on the carnivore diet and seen an alternative medicine provider who was giving her, I think, no less than 13 different supplements to help prevent diabetes. This is so high, and you can see it came up so far from normal at 126, and I checked her a full liver panel, a thyroid, made sure she wasn't in nephrotic syndrome. Everything looked okay. But despite my best efforts, I could not convince her to change her diet. And so she's in this category we call a lean mass hyperresponder. They're often, have a normal BMI, often are following the keto diet, and they just have this significant increase. So I did kind of a Hail Mary. I said, let's get a calcium score because she's 70. Like, there's a chance there might be some calcium, and maybe I can talk to her about how that indicates damage. But you can see her cholesterol had really only been up for 1 year. So it's too soon to see calcium there. But some of you may have seen this in your clinic too. It's a battle. I do have a few patients who have lost weight on the keto diet. They tell me they feel so much better. So I'm like, okay, well then let's also talk about a statin. Like, I don't want you to feel bad or gain weight either. So how can we compromise like this very real risk over years with some medicine too, if they're not interested in following more plant forward diet? And food isn't the only thing that can help improve cardiovascular risk factors. So there's several studies that suggest that for every kilogram that's lost, about 2.2 pounds, that drops the blood pressure a point. We know that the DASH diet drops the blood pressure 5 or 6 points, and a whole food plant forward diet, like we saw in some of those studies, over 10 points. Cutting back on alcohol can drop cholesterol about 4 points, and physical activity can drop it further. And so ideally, we would have patients do all of this. And I think that's why the American College of Lifestyle Medicine kind of tried to put these tenets together to really help patients be successful with lifestyle medicine. So there's 6 pillars. Plant predominant eating doesn't mean they have to be vegan or even vegetarian. I love the word just plant predominant. Eat more plants. Mostly what you eat is plants. In fact, I tell patients if 80% of what you can eat just comes from the ground, you're doing really good. That leaves 20% to when life happens, right? And you go out to eat or whatnot. The next pillar is regular physical activity. And then restorative sleep, stress management, avoidance of risky substances like tobacco and drugs, alcohol, positive social connections. So as I started to study to become certified in lifestyle medicine, it was the year 2020, year of a pandemic, and I had this much funding, $0, and could only think about how to do things for free, pretty scrappy. So I got together my employee wellness program. They have health coaches and dietitians, and recruited experts on all of these pillars from my institution. So a dietitian, someone from cardiac rehab, a sleep psychologist, a therapist, substance use counselor. And we really were able to deliver some information to employees to help them feel better and enroll in our very first HeartBeet Clinic. So I went to my leadership and said, hey, I have this idea. Again, they said, as long as it doesn't take any money, go for it. You can have 1 week to only see 40 patients. And we sent out a call, and within 24 hours, we had 40 people sign up, 40 employees. So then we tracked their blood pressure, their cholesterol, their some validated surveys on sleep and self-efficacy and those sorts of things. And then we kind of analyzed the data and said, I think this is really working. In fact, 100% of employees improved at least one of their objective measures of cholesterol, blood pressure, glucose, and weight. And so then I went back to leadership and said, hey, can we do it again? And they were like, yeah, but you can only have 1 day to see people instead of a whole week. And we still don't have any money for you. So I'm like, okay, I'm up for the challenge. And so I started to do group visits with our employees. And we were pretty lucky that my institution also has a health insurance that most employees have. So I was able to work closely with coding and compliance to kind of see, what is the reimbursement like? Am I charging correctly? What are we capturing here? And what's the best way to, make sure that patients, participants aren't paying for it, but that the health system is really getting reimbursed for this great service we're doing. And bonus, I'm saving my voice from saying the same thing to 40 different people if I can just do it in 4 group visits. Then we had enough data that we were able to get a grant to do a randomized trial. So that's the one I'm going to talk the most about here next. Oh, and here's some of the first iterations of the HeartBeet Clinic that we really saw. You can see in the middle the percentage of patients who improve their LDL, HDL, their blood pressure, sugar, even their BMI. And this is just doing a 2-month program with our employees. What really surprised me is sleep quality. So we had one speaker talk about sleep. And, before the study, 70% of patients would say their sleep was poor to terrible. And after the intervention, when on the questionnaire, 70% said it was good to excellent. So this is how the pillars interact, that if you start healthy movement, then maybe you want to eat a little bit better. And then maybe you don't want to have that drink at night. And then you're sleeping better. They all just are synergistic in how they work together. And so then this is the poster we presented at the American College of Cardiology on our group visit. So this was the first time anyone at my institution had done group visits in this way, where we just charge based on time. And we found in 4 hours, we got 675% more reimbursement compared to if we had to see all those patients one-on-one, and saved me 23 hours of clinician time. We had almost 50 patients, I believe, in this round of the HeartBeet Clinic. And then on that bottom right, you can see that for the first time, we evaluated the Life's Essential 8 score, which I'll talk more about. But we saw a signal that there was some significant improvement. So by now, I had caught some people's attention, and the Health Partners Research Institute got involved and helped secure some of our funding for our grant, that we were able to do a randomized clinical trial, and really wanted to see, was this accessible or acceptable to participants? Was it feasible? Could we, blow it up and be able to use it for more patients? And then what did that Life's Essential 8 score do? And could we add some pillars if we prolonged it from just 2 months to 4 months, like social connection, stress, and quality of life? And so we were able to randomize patients into a control group and a health coach group, as you'll see here. So everybody was recruited. Then they had surveys, labs, and vitals. We kind of randomized them to group coaching. So they met with this group coach in small groups of about 5 people once a week. And then every week they'd also have a large group learning session to people who were self-guided. And both groups had access to a workbook, as well as in a web-based kind of smartphone app that would deliver weekly tidbits of information. But self-guided did not meet with a once a week large group learning session or a health coach. So we did that for 4 months, and then we were able to give the same kind of pre and post surveys on self-efficacy, perception of their own health, as well as all the labs, the vitals, their blood pressure, weight, and to draw them in all the way to the end. With the grant, we were able to give them a $200 gift card. All right, so I think I summed it up mostly here. So we've got the health coach. That probably took the bulk of our funding, was to pay the health coach. Unfortunately, right now, health coaches are not reimbursed by insurances, but visits with clinicians are. So I did one group visit at the very beginning where I just talked about, what do all the labs mean? I used a lot of the slides that I just showed you, about why it's important to eat more plants, how to get a healthy gut microbiome, why we were checking their blood pressure, why it was important. And then at the very end, with everybody, I did a cooking demonstration in our facility's kitchen, where all these people got to meet each other for sometimes for the first time, unless they were in that first group visit together. And it was just so powerful to see people hugging and, swapping stories and, trying to make sure they formed a Facebook group to be able to stay in contact after the program was done. So really powerful as a clinician to see all the things that happened and the stories they shared and the connections they made, was really exciting. So in the group-based intervention, they did things like virtual drinking games, where we had a mocktail recipe and then did drinking games on Zoom. We did Zumba on Zoom. We did all sorts of things with the health coach. And then the people in the self-directed group would kind of read about what the topic was, what pillar they were going to focus on that week, but didn't have access to all that fun stuff. And I really thought that was going to be the secret sauce, but you're going to find out what the difference was between the groups. Yes, so we talked about they could still access the smartphone app versus via Circle. That is something that health coaches use, I guess, a lot, that our health coach had made a community for the self-directed group and then also for the health coaching group. So that's how they would log on to their Zoom classes, log on to their health coaching sessions, and then get these nice weekly emails. So you can see like, this is what the Circle app looks like. And you'll see the title, Let Us Turn Up the Beet, on kind of the tips. They could message each other, they could share recipes. And then so proud that we're actually registered under the clinicaltrials.gov. It takes money to submit to an IRB and all of those things. So Stephanie Hooker is the fantastic research psychologist I worked with to help get this across that finish line as an official trial. And these are just a few pages from the workbook. So again, you have seen this, what the plate should look like. What are some of the facts or fat from fiction in your nutrition? We even included, this picture with what are some healthy snacks as some ideas. We had a 2-week menu plan that basically was my family's favorite recipes with our different dietary likes and dislikes, and then had a grocery list for under $200 on Instacart for all the ingredients on that 2-week menu plan, and then just some ideas of things to have. And at that group visit, I was like, this is what nutritional yeast looks like. It has all the B vitamins and fiber, and this is what chia seeds and what you can put in that. And so people who've just never hooked with those sorts of things, I think it was exciting to see them pick them up, get ideas from other people who are at that group class. It was a lot of back and forth, which I really thought was unique. We don't do that in medicine very often. So what do we look at? So at the beginning and end of the week, we did the survey that incorporated all the lifestyle medicine pillars. At the end, they got kind of, was this acceptable to you? How likely are you to continue a plant-forward diet? 90% said that they would. And then we measured their blood pressure before and after, their weight before and after, and of course their glucose and lipids. And then based on all of those things, this is the American Heart Association's Essential 8. So you can see depicted in the pictures, we've got healthy movement, glucose, weight, cholesterol, blood pressure, substance use, sleep, and plant-forward eating. And you score this, out of 100, and a score of 80 or high is considered optimal cardiovascular health. So I put the website at the bottom if you want to check your own score and see where you are, but we were able to plug in all these numbers for our patients. And so this is just kind of a flow chart of how we enrolled and the number of patients we enrolled, lost a few to withdrawal or follow-up, and kind of what we ended up with to compare. And the results are in. So I expected that if you had a health coach holding your hand with 2 touch points a week, those patients obviously were going to do better. And 80% of patients in both groups improved at least one risk factor into the healthy range. So not just improved, but got their blood pressure to goal, got their glucose under 100, their BMI under 25, their total cholesterol under 200, HDL, triglycerides, LDL, or reached a goal of physical activity of over 150 minutes a week. We don't have a medication that can get 80% of our patients to get one of these to goal, right? We usually have like 5 different medications that can maybe get one of those to goal. But I was really excited to see, especially because the biggest cost for our intervention was the health coach, that maybe that's not necessary for everyone. So when we looked at both groups, combined, their Life's Essential 8 score improved about the same amount. Those lines couldn't be any more parallel, right? So the dark line is those in the group visit, started off with a little bit higher Life's Essential 8 score. And remember, the higher the better, because 80 or higher is optimal. So they move from 69.3 to 75.9. And the self-paced group also improved about the same amount, but just started a little bit lower at 63.8 up to 71. So this is meaningful change in their cardiovascular risk. But there were some differences. So the group-based really improved their Life's Essential 8 score for diet more than the self-paced group, which makes sense. They had these couple touch points. We had a lot of talks about using food as medicine that might have been easier to not be engaged with when it was just on the app, kind of a link to read an article or whatnot, or watch a video. And the Life's Essential 8 score for sleep, it interestingly improved for the group visit, but stayed about stable for the self-paced group. Again, we had some professionals interacting with our group that might have made a little bit difference there. And then we saw the self-paced group made more improvements in physical activity and tobacco exposure. And when I talked to some of those patients at our last kind of cooking class, they're like, well, I knew it was up to me. I need to get on that bike and start exercising because no one was going to help me get by the finish line. And that was something that was easier to track than diet when I didn't have someone coaching me along. And interestingly, in both groups, we saw people cut back on smoking. One person quit. And so we were able to show improvements in that. And I would say in clinical practice, getting people to successfully quit smoking is much harder than some of these other lifestyle changes. So I was really pleased to see that. Slightly better improvements in cholesterol, especially in the self-paced group, and minimal changes in glucose or BMI. Now, this is really interesting. When we did the HeartBeet Clinic with employees, the second round, when my leadership was like, yep, you can do it with employees, but you have to take the highest risk patients, employees. So we put people on paths, employees, to kind of depending on their health history. So if you are living with diabetes or already had heart disease, you're kind of on this red path. So they said, you can take people on the red path, but we're not going to help support people, pretty healthy employees. So despite that, our average weight loss was 10 pounds in 8 weeks with a population that had more risk factors and did not have as high, I would presume, of life's essential 8 score. So just really fascinating, the 5 years of experience we've had. But this again is the clinical trial that we're comparing in these numbers. So we saw some reduced stress. This is not the life's essential 8 score, but these are different questionnaires. So we saw that stress went down and social connections went up. More significantly in the group, understandably, as they're meeting every week with their small group. And we got some really good feedback, just about, the staff that was helping them, the health coach, eating habits, keeping veggies more stocked, having someone to just message with questions. And in years previous, some stories that stand out is I had a patient, because of a disability, he wasn't able to ever cook for himself, but part of our resources were meal delivery services, that come you just stick them in the microwave. And so his numbers improved significantly as he wasn't having to go to fast food and he was nervous about using a knife or preparing food. And so just to see his response, made it all worth it. And then we had lots of other good stories as well. And so here's the money shot. How do you bill for this, right? So we tried a bunch of different models throughout the years, but this has been the most successful. And most recently, because we use not just employees, this is the only time we did the HeartBeet Clinic without employees, there were 21 unique insurance plans for 29 patients. That's how hard this is to keep track of, but our billing and coding people watched every single charge go through. So when I saw, 5 to 10 patients in a group visit, I would charge a 99214 based on time. And I had a dot phrase note in the electronic medical record that would kind of say the things that were covered. Because if you have APAC, it would blow in their last vital signs, their last set of lab results. I'd add in a calcium score if they had that, or anything else that I thought was pertinent to family history, kind of what their 10-year, risk would be of a cardiovascular event. Now we would use the prevent calculator, of course. And what we found was we made a lot of money. So if in those 4 visits, if they were individual, we would have billed $1,740. You'll be shocked to know you don't always get paid what you bill, but the clinic would make about $1,000 for 4 visits. But in 4 group visits, we were able to bill over $12,000 and $12,615, and we were reimbursed $7,579. And so my clinic was pretty impressed with this and is trying to figure out how can we do more group visits. This is delivering education, but would there be an opportunity to, do monthly, group visits and charge for them? Since we can't charge or bill for a health coach education visit, would there be an opportunity to actually prescribe some medicine within a group visit? And those are things I haven't explored yet, but they're on my list. Now, this billing is a little bit different than shared medical visits. So the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has great resources on that, but you need to do a physical exam, have some more complex medical decision making to kind of bill for that. With this CPT code, just billed on time, We took vital signs because we wanted to study what happened, but you don't need that to capture billing to give 30 minutes of education based on lifestyle medicine, which was really exciting. And for me, it saved 16.5 hours of clinician time of saying the same thing, in these groups, and I was able to see more complex cardiology patients, in that time period. So then we also looked at, well, what about the out of pocket costs for patients? I'm always worried about that. I was a social worker before I went to PA school. And so the program started in January. So a lot of people hadn't met their deductible yet, but 41% of people had no copay, which is fantastic. 21% had a $1 to $99 charge, 10% had to pay $100 to $299, and 28% I suspect hadn't met their deductible yet and had to pay a little over $300. But we had no feedback, that was unacceptable to patients. Part of their consent form was that we will bill your insurance, but you may be responsible, for some costs. So they knew that going in. So in conclusion, delivering the HeartBeet Clinic in both group-based and self-paced online format was feasible, it was acceptable, and it was associated with clinically significant improvements in cardiovascular health as evidenced by the improvement in the Life's Essential 8 score. And in talking to patients, we really thought some patients would have loved to have a health coach. In fact, at the very end, when we wrapped it up, they're like, I really felt like I missed out. I think I would have done a lot better. And some of those in the health coach-led group were like, this was way too much. I missed like half of them. I don't have time for something like that. And this is the deal with randomization, right? But I think in the future, we'd love to offer a stepped approach where maybe, kind of a choose your own adventure. And if you're being successful, great, continue. If things have plateaued, what our goals are, then maybe moving to more of a health coach group. And then we're working on trying to secure funding to do a digital intervention, kind of an app that we could offer to anyone that automatically sent some of those messages through the app and could tie in with our electronic medical record. And so we are honored that we've gotten some recognition through these different organizations and articles. We're submitting a submission to the Journal of Lifestyle Medicine on this latest program, so stay tuned for that. And what can you do now? We're almost done. There'll be some time for questions. If you're interested in learning more, I really enjoyed the whole process of getting certified in lifestyle medicine. So I have the website there. They are fantastic fans of PAs. They have a PA work group. If any of you have been involved, you know that they want you there and your expertise. If you're starting on the ground, you're like, I'm going to start a HeartBeet Clinic of my own. Think about using your employee health program first with employees because you can utilize those for free. They want to get their employees healthy. So I found that was a really good workaround. And then all the resources I developed, all the videos we took, I have on a website that I can pass along to any patient if they want to listen to an expert on sleep medicine for free, or my favorite dietitian talking about avoiding the blood sugar roller coaster and where do you get protein from plants and those sorts of things. And then I just walked into my local grocery store. Many of them have dietitians and was like, hey, will you record a cooking demonstration or in COVID in 2020, we had a dietitian go around with a video camera and be like, this is, coconut aminos, and this is where the Impossible Burgers are, so it was just kind of fun way to deliver information that way. And then the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine on their website they train their own chefs that hold classes for very reasonable prices to all the way to coming in your house and redoing your pantry and helping walk you along the way. And then if you're interested in even more education, you could become a certified clinical lipid specialist through the National Lipid Association. So they also have a great home for PAs. This is where I was able to build a little more knowledge on the medications, as well as become a clinical investigator for pharmaceutical trials. And they love that they know I'm going to talk to people about food as medicine first. That's always before they pay for expensive medicine. They're like, but have you talked about moving more and eating less, which we're all so sick of hearing? Yes, I feel like we have programs set up, and yet when cholesterol is 80% genetic, we need to sometimes use medication as well, but for those high absorbers, you can see such a big improvement. But beyond just the numbers, patients felt better, using food as medicine. So with that, I'm just so thankful for those of you who stayed on the line, and I see a couple questions. Let me bring those up here. All right, so the first one from billing for time. Yes. So I bill for the whole time and with the whole group. So my kind of time statement is, total time spent with a patient was 30 minutes, with 20 minutes spent reviewing, the importance of eating more, food as medicine, controlling risk factors, the importance of sleep, yada, 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 substance misuse. And then I also spent, 15 minutes reviewing, or maybe I'll say 16 minutes, reviewing their personal risk factors, family history, medications that they're on, their tenure, cardiovascular risk. And so I make it more personalized. So it has to be more than half of the time that is individual. So I'll say the total time that I spent with the group and then how much I spent like writing the note, reviewing their labs and coming up with their risk factors. So in the HeartBeet Clinic, they all got their labs before the group visit so that I could really incorporate that one. I took half a day and just pumped out all those notes on those patients. And then I do not spend a small amount of time with each patient. Nope. So at the end, I say there's time for questions, about 10 minutes for questions at the end of our group visit. And so I do add that also to my time statement at the end of the note. Questions and concerns by the patients were answered. And let's see. Oh, great. And someone else is working, Megan's working on group visits. And how long does it take to do certification? So for lifestyle medicine, oh, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been about 5 years, but I think it was 30 or 40 hours of CME. And I think about 20 hours of that had to be in person at their in-person conference. So you can get modules to help you pass the certification, which is kind of a 4-hour test. And I felt very prepared once I went through all those modules on those pillars of lifestyle medicine, the evidence behind it, motivational interviewing, all that fun stuff. And then you sit for the board exam. And by the end of that, I was ready to go. Yeah, so I think if you attended the virtual conference, with COVID, they had some leeway where, yep, attending the virtual counts toward those in-person hours. But I'm not sure where that status is now, but it's easy to find on their website. But I'm so glad you liked that. Yeah, any other questions? You can type it in the chat, or I don't know if you're able to come off mute. Yeah, Paola.
Hey, Laura. So I have a question because I treat breast cancer patients, so it's a little different, but I do have to manage a lot of their cardiovascular risk factors while they are on AI therapy and tamoxifen. And I had a patient that came in the other day with like the lipoprotein A change, and her mom had like heart disease and like a heart attack like in her 40s after menopause. So my question is, from your perspective, from the lifestyle medicine, because she's still very young, she's only 38 herself, how aggressive would you be in sending her to cardiology and to do a lot of these lifestyle changes with her needing 5 years of therapy for endocrine side?
So I think it depends a little bit on how high the lipoprotein A is. So that is dose dependent. So if normal's under 30, and this is a protein that comes off the cholesterol particle that makes it more sticky, so to speak, and about 20% of humans have high levels at some point. Over 50, it's considered a risk factor. But when it's in the triple digits, and we can measure it in milligrams or nanomoles. So if it's over 100 in milligrams or 200 in nanomoles, that's considered like very, very elevated, that's when I would start to consider, even at a young age, starting therapy. We know that, statins are very safe. That would probably be my most potent way to address that risk factor of lipoprotein A, because it's genetic. No matter what she does with lifestyle, it's not going to change how sticky her cholesterol is. But we can, right now, our goal is, well, if we can't change how sticky it is, we can't change that lipoprotein A, at least we can make sure she doesn't have a lot of it by trying to drive down the LDL. So if the lipoprotein A, is over 100, then it's reasonable to consider getting that LDL under 100. So if you can do that with lifestyle, great. But she's someone I also might think about getting an HSCRP. that tells us if there's inflammation in the heart arteries. Now, if she's in the throes of cancer treatment, that might be elevated too, but just another thing you can think about checking. For women around 40, when they have high lipoprotein A levels, it's reasonable to consider a CT coronary calcium scan to quick look. Has there been damage to their heart arteries that their body has repaired with little band-aids of calcium along that you'll see? And it's not as sensitive at younger ages because it takes time to build up, but if that lipoprotein A is really high, I'll have patients in their 20s have calcification because of that. But I don't think it's ever wrong to work on lifestyle changes. So if to say these are all ways that you can help improve your cardiovascular risk factors, healthy movement, healthy sleep, eating more plants are all going to help improve her cardiovascular risk factors.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think I'm going to send her over to cardiology just because I think her cholesterol and LDL are quite high and she's
Yeah.
not like overeating. So I think she really needs to be on something that helps a lot. Because again, I don't always see it and I always treat it, but I'm very cautious of it with my patients getting AI therapy or endocrine therapy.
Yeah. Oh, I'm impressed that you're thinking outside the oncology box. I mean, I think we all are learning that we have to do that now. There's not as many silos anymore, so that's great. Um, and then let's see, how did you get your coders on board? So, I found a coder with a full sleeve of tattoos who was vegan. And I just happened to run into her at some other meeting, and she was like, "Oh, I heard your presentation. I'm vegan and I love what you're saying." And I was like, "Oh, by the way, can you help me with this project?" And I kind of lured her in. So I think finding people that are passionate about it, and if you don't have that person, which most of us don't, telling them, I want to make money for the organization. I want to make sure we're doing it, and starting small. So, how I really started was with my general cardiology patients who had, high cholesterol, but also heart failure and AFib and all the other things. I had about 20 patients that I kind of developed things that ended up going into the workbook. And I showed my leadership, like, look, I got their blood pressure and cholesterol to improve. Can I start seeing, a week of patients just doing lifestyle medicine and track what happens? And once I was able to show that that really had improvement, then they gave the green light for a small pilot study to look at group visits. And then those coders, I mean, I think it's overwhelming as a coder if you're like, I'm going to just start this and hope for the best. If you're like, I'm going to start with 20 patients, let's see how the insurance reimburses it. And now hopefully we had 21 different insurance plans that all of them reimbursed it a little bit differently, but nobody said no. We got some money from all of them. And so I think as long as you let patients know we're just in the beginning of it. It could be a similar cost to a one-on-one visit, but you're going to get a lot of good information. Are you open to that? And they may say yes and they may say no, but I think it's worth trying. And sometimes you just got to be scrappy and try it and see if, ask for forgiveness instead of permission for small pilot projects like this. And I will give you my email address right here in the chat. Now we merged, if any of you have been through that painful process, we're at a point where we have two different emails. I don't know when they're gonna make me switch over to the other one. I've been here over 20 years. So it will be either laura.ross@parknicollet.com or laura.j.ross@healthpartners.com. Kind of the same now, but they've told us to kind of start to transition. So either one works right now. Probably the Health Partners one is the one that's going to stay years out. Okay, and then Allison had a great question in our last few minutes. Let's get back up there. How do you document individual notes for group visits other than the dot phrase? So, do you feel the documentation time is more important? Yep, so each of my group visits had 5 to 10 patients. In the few years after COVID, I did group visits virtually and got reimbursed for it. But then last year, the Medicare or the powers that be said, we're not going to pay you for group visits for virtual visits anymore. So we went back to just in person, 5 to 10 people. We gave them what times they could pick, and our study coordinator kind of worked with them to find a spot for them. So we knew best practice was no more than 10. And then depending on what time worked best for them. So in my dot phrase, it would blow in their name. It would say, blow in what their family history was, their social history, what their substance use was, what their blood pressure, their last weight, what their cholesterol was. And then in my electronic medical record, we can do .CVR for cardiovascular risk, and it will put in their prevent score now. And even if they don't have an albumin or an A1C, it will estimate it based on the information they have, which, as you may know, is just fantastic because it has their zip code to help incorporate the social determinants of health and comes up with a much more accurate 10-year risk. And so then in the assessment and plan, that's where I put my most time to see, well, what's really relevant to this patient? What's their BMI? What's their family history? Do they have a lipoprotein A that I can find? Do they have an elevated calcium score? Do they have high cholesterol? Do they have impaired fasting glucose? So I really took my time to type out that, but the plan was the same for all of them. This is what we talked about in the group visit. And then my next paragraph was, we're going to check labs in, 4 months for glucose, cholesterol. Because we are a study, I said we're also going to check their blood pressure. We're going to do validated surveys, and they will get a MyChart note from me to review the results. So that was something at that time we didn't capture, but some of you may know we might need to do another webinar as we're running out of time that you can charge for e-visits to review lab results. So I think we would incorporate that to just get a little bit of money back for that time. And then I think the most important part that the coders told me was to put at the end, like we do for our current notes in cardiology, total time, 30 minutes. 16 minutes was spent reviewing the patient's risk factors, their blood pressure, their lab results, and reviewing this education, the pillars of lifestyle medicine. And that is what the coder said was all it took to get it covered. But what they told me later is that you don't have to put a physical. So I didn't do a physical exam on anyone. None of that was in the note. This is just a preventive medicine visit on education. Great. Well, I know we're out of time. I want to thank PAOM for having me today and for all these great questions. And I look forward to your emails if more questions come up and follow up. And if you see me at AAPA or ACC or NLA, please reach out. I'd love to connect with you personally.
Laura, we want to thank you again. This was an amazing presentation, and we did all learn a whole bunch. So we really thank you. If you notice, guys, on the chat, she did actually put her email. So if you have any further questions, she can be contacted on that. And again, as a reminder to pick up your CME hours, contact PAs in obesity medicine. .com at gmail.com, and that way you can get your hour as well. And Laura, thank you again. We would love seeing you again, and we'd love to have you present for us at any time.
Great. Well, thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful night.